I felt skin unravel along my spine just a moment before the scream began. Not mine, hers. Rhaenyra, the vat-born queen thing they called the First Pleasure, made a sound like a ceramite plate being torn in two. Somewhere in the chiming cathedral of Drex's inner sanctum, her lungs had finally failed her. It had been less than 14 seconds since I jammed the blade between her ribs. Flesh folded wrong against my hands. The polymorphine was slipping. I should not have felt anything. Chemical precision was supposed to hold, but something was leaking underneath, some twitch of nerve pattern that didn't belong to this body. She was gurgling, still trying to scream through the shredded trachea. I watched her jaw move. I hadn't known she could speak. I didn't say anything. The sanctum shivered in pale silks and copper filigree. Incense burned in droplet form from the ceiling, liquid scent condensing and falling at regular intervals into pools the color of spoiled milk. Drex liked symmetry. He bred his courtiers to match fonts carved from ancient subroutines. Every face had been scaled to a harmonious ratio of cheekbone to orbital augment space, even Rhaenyra's. Now her face drooped against the floor vents like a peeled mask. I pulled back. The fingers of my left hand weren't matched. 3 natural, 2 still mid-shift. The ring and pinky pulsed with someone else's skin tone. Wrong shade, wrong vein map. The chemical timing was off. No, worse. It was entropic. Morphic coherence wasn't just slipping. It was forgetting what shape it wanted. That complicates things. I scanned the chamber. 2 crawler serfs twitched from their wall sockets, stirring slowly like insects waking from a freeze slumber. They wouldn't reach me in time. If I moved now, fast enough? No. My knee locked mid-thrust, bone jolted. The joint wasn't mine. For an endless second, the concubine form I had worn for 11 weeks dissolved against the floor like wet parchment. Muscles rethreaded without instruction, spine coils retracted half an inch, eyes reset. Taste became copper iron cinnamon all at once. Mission integrity compromised, I heard myself say. It wasn't my voice, or rather, it was one I hadn't used in 7 years. Low, clipped, with that precise cadence they drilled in initiate phase. That voice wasn't supposed to surface outside deployment recitals. The scream stopped. Rhaenyra didn't die quietly, but death exists on a curve. I watched the coils of her throat slacken, jaw unhinged 1 notch further. The coded sub-vocal obedience null locked in her soft palate triggered late. Somewhere beneath skin stretched too tight over false bones, a last recorded phrase played into the open air. He is the architect. He is... Silence. I stepped back, my heels stuck to the flooring, resin, not blood. Drex lined his sanctum tiles with reactive sealant. If enough body mass leaked into the seams, it hardened, preserved the tableau. Decorative murder. Ritual as fondness. The vox bead lodged behind my right ear was itching. I activated it with a tongue click, decode row pattern, black channel. 4 layers deep below standard comnet. Broadcast narrow. Target code, Sigil 9. Operative compromised. Primary magistrate remains alive. Polymorphine origin degradation. Request extract. No reply. Not even the static that pretends to be static. I shut it down. Repeated the click. Again. Still nothing. Temple's silence wasn't rare, but in 10 years of field-deep subterfuge, I'd never had a call fire null. Suggests orphan status. Suggests preemptive disposition. Suggests worse. They already counted me dead. Not acceptable. I pressed my back to the nearest support pillar, heard it moan. Organic composite. Drex had a fondness for graft marble. There were faces in the stone. A dozen, maybe 2, all locked mid-expression like saints who passed out only halfway through the vision. Eyes traced me. Nothing moved, except my skin. It was crawling again, tiny pulses as subdermal matrices reknit themselves. Identity loss should have taken hours. I was losing it in minutes. Auto cascade failure, nerve backflow, one dose too many, or the wrong memory spiking at the wrong moment. I glanced down. The tremor in my hand was familiar, in the way a nightmare brought weekly becomes familiar. I'd seen it before, during the Kyther Ops, when I'd worn the bones of an ecclesiarch's grandnephew for 8 months and once forgot that I wasn't born on Canticle Prime. The shakes had begun then too, but nothing like this. This was rot from center outward. Movement. At the far end of the sanctum, a viewport iris gently peeled open. Smooth hydraulics, no alert klaxons. That meant Drex was returning. The Magos didn't like whispered alarms. He preferred discovery, like art, unfortunate timing. I'd planned to eliminate him during his communion session, a 27-minute neuropraxic stupor induced every 6th night by a spinal download catalyst. This wasn't that night, not yet, which meant improvisation, and improvisation is messier than death. The doors unfurled completely. Drex entered like a ceremony, not a person. His frame was half chassis, half scripture. One arm was a braid of servo heads, each blinking a different doctrine of hate. His eyes assessed with chemical precision. The left one dilated against the atmosphere. The right streamed data directly into whatever passed for his soul. He paused, saw the corpse. Then me. He said the name. Not my name. Hers. He called me Silivara. There was affection in his modulation. A note tuned for ownership, like he'd named a species, not a person, not a danger standing 5 meters from him in a half-finished skin suit. Hilarious, really. The genius of a Forge World prince, flanked by predictive subroutines and soul-bound hazard alerts, and he still didn't see a threat until I moved. Which I did. Fast. The blade arced low. Simpler than poison, cleaner than combustive implants. Just deal and drive and a prayer to a god who never listens. But my ankle gave mid-strike. The foot had reshaped into a minor arch form inconsistent with the stance. Legacy tissue. From a past identity? I couldn't place it. I fell sideways. The blade hit chassis, not penetration. Glance, spark. Drex's servo braid lashed, caught my midsection, threw me exactly 2.4 meters into a pillar shaped like a woman's thigh. Part of my jaw detached on impact. Skin tore backward into something closer to my mission default, not the concubine, something earlier, my field self. He paused, tilted his head. Ah, recognition. Not of me, no, but of not her. He opened a port of his thoracic armor and drew out a stim pack glistening with unguents. He didn't inject it, just watched it spin in his palm, a toy, a weapon, a memory. I spat a molar. It bounced once, rolled under a torture throne molded into a lion's likeness. My tongue felt unfamiliar inside the mouth it occupied. He stepped forward. I waited. Let the tremor subside. Let the next skin try to hold. I had 22 confirmed kills in the last 9 years, half during infiltration, before target declaration. None of them felt as useless as this. Drex was talking now. Words like disappointment and fascination drifted past his lips. I didn't register most of them. Not important. What mattered was the distance, 3.9 meters, and closing. His servos began to click. I reached back, opened a flesh pocket behind the left shoulder blade. It's not where most people keep weapons, but then most people don't grow bone sheaths to hide monofilament garrotis. I flicked the catch. The fiber unwound snake silent. My fingers shook. Half my hand was still wrong. I used the other. He reached and stopped. Mid-step. His foot hovered. A microsecond too long. He was analyzing the residue. Rhea Lyra's blood. Traces of my skin. Protein traces folding in the air. AI threads wrapping over scent and particulate. His internal logic engine must have arrived at one of the conclusions I feared. He looked me in the eye and said softly, flatter than calculation, "You are not designed to exist." Then the siren wailed. Not temple, not even Mechanicus standard. This was old. Banned pre-Imperia code linguistics, a cry drive trigger signal. Drex turned fast, faster than I expected. The garrote looped and missed. His chassis dislocated sideways. Bones don't do that, unless they aren't bones anymore. I didn't chase. I ran. Past the corpse, past the open viewport, past the crippled crawler serfs wheezing digital prayers to their coded matron Simi. The corridor skin closed behind me. My fingers checked the jawline, still twitching. The polymorphine hadn't stabilized. If it wasn't done by the next security gate, I'd be pulped into nutrient plasma by friendly filtration systems. 3 billion souls lost this forge world. That seemed careless. Now one more would vanish and no one would blink. Except me. Because my eyes kept changing orientation. One saw infrared. One saw memory. Neither liked what I was becoming. They shaved my head before I could speak. Not from lack of physical ability. Speech comes early to the desperate, but from the conditioning. They said names were poison. Roots, anchors, things enemies could pull on. I remember one of them calling me Subject Niner Theta. I remember another doing it in the tone you'd use with a particularly stupid servitor. It didn't sting exactly. Nothing had the time to sting. Pain was scheduled 6 hours a day. Nutrition 1. The schola sat like mildew on the edge of the Callidus temple. You could smell the chem wash from your cot, acrid and sterile, mingled with a note of blood that never quite dissipated. Walls were steel, floors were steel. The ceiling dripped during the Terra summers, which is to say every third day. We weren't allowed mirrors, not for vanity, they said. I'm not sure any of us could have told each other apart in those first months anyway. Maybe I had a sister then, maybe a brother. It didn't matter. They scrubbed that early. There were 62 of us. They culled the first 12 in week 3. Nothing personal. The breath regulator test. If you failed to slow your heart rate to 6 beats a minute in sub-zero temperatures, you didn't wake up. They made the rest of us watch. Education. A body left in the cold develops this bluish-gray sheen after enough hours. I assumed the expression was fear. Later, I realized it was just what a frozen face looked like under surgical lighting. The surviving 50 practiced in pairs. Speech control, mimicry drills, biomod thresholds. I remember wads of synthetic muscle fiber being injected under my jawline to test tolerance. They told me I would thank them once I could speak any dialect in the segmentum on command. I thanked them on day 40. Teeth blood-slicked from pressure extrusion. They told me flattery would only get me killed faster and assigned me to the next injection schedule 2 days early. Good behavior is punished. Predictability breeds weakness. I remember the face of the girl in my mirror. That's how I started thinking of her, even before the final test. We weren't mirrors in the sense of similarity. We were identical. Absolutely identical. They had grown us side by side, adjusted our bones with the same pressure gel matrices, the same genetic feedstock ratios. A matched pair, raised separately. Didn't know it at the time, of course. That would have compromised the trial. Her name used to be mine. The instructors never told me that, but she whispered it during one of the gland cord threshold drills in the dormitory, half asleep and twitching from stabilizer withdrawal. A name too soft for this place. I said nothing. I already knew names were traps. The final test was not called that. It came with no warning, no ritual. One morning, a handler in Mechanicus Reds blindfolded me and led me through 5 security nodes. The sound of cogitator wheels and hiss of atmosphere change told me I was underground. Deeper than usual. The air down there was dry, no blood tang, no mold. Just cold, filtered precision. They placed a mirror image of me on the opposite side of the training chamber. I knew it wasn't a mirror because she flinched, and I didn't. They handed me a morphic dose of polymorphine, pure stuff, uncut, raw. My first unsupervised use. The instructor's eyes didn't move, just said, "Assume the target configuration." I had no idea what that meant until I moved, and my body flowed. Her body, really. They wanted me to become her. Despite the training, despite the mantras, my nerves ignited like they'd never done this before. Because I was her now. She was me. I could feel her face moving on my own skull, mirroring back with a delayed echo. She trembled. I matched it. I wanted to stop, but stopping was failure. There was a needle in her hand. There was a needle in mine. We both moved at once. The first puncture didn't kill her. It just stunned. The second hit artery. Engineered efficiency. My fingers didn't shake. I watched myself collapse. Limp, twitching, bleeding my name, my real one, into steel paneling. They didn't applaud. One of the overseers vomited in a corner. Not out of empathy. Just low stimulant regulation that day, I'd learned later. He was purged a week later for lending his credentials to another handler. I didn't feel anything about that. They brought me back to the upper barracks and put me in sterile detention for 3 days. All my senses shut down, part of the standard mind clean protocol. During that time, I dreamt in silence. No images, no sound, just echoes of things I couldn't pin down, half words in familiar voices. When I emerged, they fitted me with a name shield circuit. It's a cortical buzzer that shocks synapse clusters if you form a solid self-concept. It's unpleasant. Not quite pain. More like being skinned in reverse. An instructor placed the serial sheet in my hand. The paper was black, not often used. I was told only candidates bound for high acquisition training receive this designator. High acquisition meant Callidus, meant polymorphine, memory layering, speech grafting, the whole murder theater program. The handler told me my designation was Veil, just Veil. No prefix, no suffix, a full mask name. I asked him what it meant. He slapped me, open palm. "Not your place to ask definitions," he said. "You'll lose it when we shed you." That was the first time I had an urge to smile. Not because it was funny, because it meant he thought I could survive long enough to need shedding. Training escalated after that. They introduced face paint rituals, synthetic pheromone calibration, surgical bone fusing. I spent half a rotation bent backward in an exoskeletal rack so they could re-angle my spine for faster morph kinetics. They let me watch transmissions from real targets then, rogue governors, planetary nobles, traitor cults. Taught me how to laugh the way they did, how to stitch a thought to a gate. I had 37 dialects running baseline by the start of my 14th year. Some of them I can no longer silence. The first sanctioned mission came with ceremony. Little banners hung from the chamber walls, recycled from previous uses. I saw success through absence, stitched in calligraphic loop above the narrow doorway. A handler handed me the target brief. I skimmed it. What caught in my eye was the image. Myself. Rather, her. The one I had killed years ago. Perfect teeth, bright eyes, a sparkle that had somehow survived mechanical scan compression. They didn't bring her back. That would have been wasteful. They revived her biometrics, inserted her into a low-tier hive political cell on Xiron Beta 19. She wasn't herself, of course, but she was enough like her, enough to make me hesitate halfway through boarding the drop shuttle. I still remember the flight in. Gray-skinned storm clouds, a whine from mag disturbance in the lower atmosphere. My harness itched no matter how I adjusted. I listened to mantra loop 12 as the craft drifted toward low orbit. Belief is submission. Identity is blade. Duty is bliss. It didn't help. Xiron Beta 19 had a smell. Oily citrus rot from the industrial runoff, laced with something floral. Mutation in the civic scrubber system. Fitting. I assumed the recommended disguise, an internal logistics auditor. Unloved, unknown. Perfect. I infiltrated within 19 hours and reached proximity to the target by the second morning. We shared a room for 7 minutes, enough for tea and small talk. She commented on the bitterness of the recaf. Reached for sugar. I reached for my wrist knife instead. Silicon-coated, honed to molecule edge. Deployment, silent. In and out through the ribs, bypassing voice. No struggle. Eyes widened in something like recognition. Maybe she remembered, or maybe I did. The Callidus Temple never instructs post-debrief processing. You're told not to dwell. The neural patches ensure you physically can't ruminate past the 3-minute mark. Still, sometimes the muscle memory lingers, like I sometimes still reach for the sugar, even when there's none on the table. The mission was a success. They debriefed me for 6 hours, scraped my neurotransmitter levels, reviewed synaptic wear on linguistic centers, then cleared me for Tier 3 operations. I was 17, a seeker of lives not mine, hunter of faces I would wear and discard and barely remember. I carry traces of them, under the skin, embedded linguistic fragments, old laughter that spills out unbidden, the way my hand twitches when someone speaks a name too softly. They say not to call it guilt. The temple uses a different word. Echo. Memory without meaning. Residual waveform. I dream sometimes of a mirror that doesn't reflect. I think I'm looking into it, or out from it. Hard to tell. I think I say something. A name, maybe. But there's no sound. Just a ripple. I wake up with a stiffness around my jaw. Sometimes it stings. Sometimes it doesn't. I had skin like polished amber, and eyes so wide they hinted at innocence. That was the trick of it, the illusion of fragility packaged in a body engineered to suggest deep dependence. The role was called Serali. She'd been a favored consort of Drex for 16 months before vanishing into a protein slurry. Officially, she succumbed to destabilized augment rejection. Unofficially, she was vivisected in Quadrant 7 of the heretek Medicus Vault. Every gland and synapse fed to the data thrones for comparison against me. She had a high pain threshold and obsessive tendencies. The memories harvested from her brainstem hinted at jealousy rituals and hunger for approval. These were useful artifacts. I wore them like jewelry. Every head tilt, every breath, measured, practiced, intoxicant soft. The arrival chamber stank of cog lubricant and sanctified pheromones. Drex liked his introductions to be disorienting. The scent blend induced mild euphoria, followed by compliance. I adjusted my ventilation rate accordingly and simulated a sigh. I was presented in offering posture, knees atop a stitched carpet of flayed cherub wings, wrists open at the lap, vertebrae curved just beyond human limits. Dozens of ocular drones hung like cut fruit from the chamber's ceiling, watching every fascia twitch. They calibrated me against Serali's record. The margin for error was less than 0.3%. I gave them 0.07 and blinked twice out of rhythm to mimic nervousness. He descended from his throne lift in sections. The outer shell was a crawler exosuit of rusted brass and sin-skin tracks, layered with absurd ceremonial etchings, half administratum, half gibberish. His upper torso was largely human, but drawn thin by life extension floods. Wires ran through his cheekbones. His lower jaw was polished ceramite, the teeth real. He liked keeping the bite. Drex viewed me with an archivist's curiosity, nothing close to affection. He circled once, murmured ritual initiator phrases in corrupted binaric, then clicked his fingers for the scent probes to disengage. He demanded I speak the first memory of him that mattered. Serali's memory. He once replaced her lungs with triple filament oral filters so she could hear the music of static. She'd wept for 6 hours from the voice loss. It had pleased him. "I remember," I whispered, "what it felt like to hear your pulse before you spoke. I thought it was a song." He kissed my third vertebra. Success. The pleasure court wasn't as opulent as it was obscene. Fabrica vaults converted into living quarters, entire walls breathing under patterned flesh veils. Here, nobles were not elevated by wealth, but by the inventiveness of their surgical afflictions. One had his skeleton excised entirely. He moved through sinew motive coils embedded in the floors, like a jellyfish in heat. Another woman wore her ancestral memories in optic stains across her eyelids and would blink entire histories at you with practiced seduction. Drex's favorites, all altered, all broken, all documented meticulously in cortex ledgers. I read them nightly from a recessed data auger in my spine, disguised as a spinal beauty tattoo. Empress Lock script. Nonsense to the eye, but mapped perfectly to temple cipher. I followed routines, morning soma aerobics, mid-cycle engagements, ceremonial feedings, court performances, augment oaths whispered during oral rites. The work was physical, psychological, spiritual in the cruelest way. To survive, the implanted persona had to believe her own lies. I gave her just enough room to exist. Serelai loved Drex. Serelai would die for Drex. I let her infect me with her loyalty like a terminal condition, and then, as with all infections, symptoms appeared. The first was minor. I caught myself humming low phantom hymns during a preparation ritual. Not Serelai's habits. It was from a previous mission, a sub-cleric on Veria Hive with a voice like circumcised brass. That particular identity was liquidated 5 years ago with a crater-sized indictment, but here her memory rode behind my eyes like a tick in velvet. Second glitch, cadence drift. I began pacing Drex's garden atrium, not like Serelai, who would float, but like a junior commissar I once wore for a tribunal elimination. Back straight, heel snap precise. Drex noticed. He called it charming irregularity. I called it a warning. I let slip the name General once during a private altercation in Feedback Chamber 7. I caught myself too late. He corrected me gently, implant probe brushing against my epiglottis. He said he forgave the mistake. He said I was more than function. I was art. I nearly activated my terminal phage. Instead, I bent the memory. Recontextualized it as Serelai's. She had dreamed him atop the battlefield. And a dream, by definition, was not reality. Enough of the persona accepted the falseness to stabilize. At night, in the stasis tube that posed as a lover's bower, I repeated idiocorrective chants in silence. I am no one. I have no name. This is the role, not the self. They worked, mostly. Then something began to thrum in me when he touched my throat. Something softer than hate. Close to yearning. Synthetic, I told myself. Residual implant bias. Nothing worth reporting. I considered reporting it anyway. Instead, I documented 11 guard rotations, 7 kill path hypotheses, and a minor irregularity in food distribution patterns within the slave kitchen levels. I accounted for every molecule of deviation in the bath oils. I refined assassination vectors between the surgical theater and the memory temple, tracking when Drex's mind interfaced with the data shrouds. I plotted a subtle nanophage cocktail that could degrade his neurocache over 7 days, timed to coincide with his eclipse meld ceremony. I did my job. But when he spoke about despair, the kind he extracted from half-born clones writhing in the ritual tanks, that's when I felt something. Not pity, not revulsion, recognition, the way he said it, that beyond all flesh-infused bone, an echo remained. A scream turned inward and hollow. He called it the gift of clarity. I had heard similar phrasing once in Temple's psycho-remedial sermons. They were warning us about identity retention errors during deep impersonation cycles. They called it distilled self-haunting. Drex called it communion. He told me I was lucky. "You remember what you were, don't you?" he said once. "Not everything, fragments, but enough to make the forgetting beautiful." I didn't answer. Seralai's script didn't include it. Later, alone in the scent vaults, I exhaled through a filter of powdered lilies and choked on a sudden mental image. My sister, crying as I slid the blade into her side, saying my name. What was it? What was it? I licked the blood from the sim skin in memory and said, "No one. I'm no one." 16 days into the embedment, a change surfaced. A courtier failed to recognize me. He'd been present the previous month, witnessed my elevation ceremony, recorded it in his optic thread. Yet when he saw me in the harem's reflection pool, he bowed to another, a genetic decant I had never met. I confronted him in Seralai's voice. He shrugged. "She was Seralai too. I thought you'd been upgraded." I filed the detail, began cross-referencing court rotation schedules, found 3 other concubines with overlapping biometric records, constructed from partial clones. Drex had been experimenting with duplication, identity replication, overlapping personas across different bodies. Seralai hadn't been his first Seralai. I was Seralai 4, and they had all failed in some private, ugly way. I found entries. One died from synaptic spasms during pleasure recalibration. 2 developed memory bleed, dreamed of desserts she'd never seen. 3 suicided during void fast, wrote a message on her inner thigh in a language no one remembered teaching her. None of them were me. But I had all their instincts built in. During the next engagement with Drex, I kissed his ruined lip and felt my throat sealing over as though choking on the words. I told him I existed because of him, and he smiled, so gently, like a teacher who knows the student just learned the wrong lesson. "My love," he whispered, "you have never existed despite me, only because." That night, I dreamt of steel, not poetic or symbolic, just rusting, unbreakable steel. A floor, a wall, a cage. Me in the center, trying faces on like masks. None of them stuck, and my skin bubbled with polymorphine withdrawal. I wanted to scream, but I didn't have a throat anymore. Just a blank panel. I woke in a new shape. Not Seralai. Not any past persona I remembered authorizing, just something adjacent. Pretty, compliant, hollow-eyed. Drex didn't notice, or if he did, he played ignorant. I held that faltering form together for 17 minutes before triggering a spinal correction code from the temple to reset tissue orientation. There was pain. Real pain. Muscles tearing against each other, the skin flexing out of pattern, too much shifting, too often. The limit had never been meant to be pressed that far. I whispered the mantras again, paused, then whispered them backward. "I am no one," I told the mirror. "I was someone." There was a message waiting in my data spine that evening. Unsanctioned, unsigned. A scrap of binary input laced with melodic distortion, like someone trying not to sound like themselves. It simply said, "If you feel like pieces, it's because you've been too many holes." I didn't respond. I archived it, encrypted it 13-fold, read it 4 more times. On the 5th, I said aloud, though none should have been listening. "So," and waited like a fool for something more. That night in bed, Drex curled a cable hand around my hip, muttered that I was his best design, not the prettiest, not the smartest, but the one who dreamed the least. My breathing remained smooth, but my skin twitched once, betraying the lie. He didn't notice, or maybe he did. And just like that, I wasn't sure who'd won. The message wasn't supposed to be there. I shouldn't have seen it. Not with these eyes, not with these hands, not with this skin, still clinging damply to the concubine's frame that reeked of myrrh and sweat and Drex's invasive touch. The servitor's data path should have looped clean past me. Internode 37 Beta was for loyalists only. Cyber serfs with loyalty code burns deep behind the orbital socket. And yet, the stream hiccuped as I brushed it, walking past the Temple of Mirth, where oblation rites were being perfunctorily enacted in the form of an acid bath orgy. And there it was, a data pulse, inconsistent, on a frequency I knew but hadn't heard since the Marn factory hive on Canis 7. Back then, I was Bayless Thorn, court scribe to a forge archduke with 7 reactive livers and no sense of metaphor. Chen Guang Zai Xiezhong, the stream whispered. Morning light in blood, old shadow code, abyssal pathway markers. Embedded inside was the identifier spool. Hara 13, dead 2 years. Catalogued, consumed. Had her voice been shredded and remade like all of ours had been? The package hidden within the data stream slid into my cortical buffer like a splinter under the nail. Unauthorized, heretical, a neural grave marker pretending to be a blessing. I should have deleted it. Instead, I blinked once to confirm, then twice to override the first blink. Sacrilege ritualized as consent, and the data opened. Her voice didn't sound like hers. It sounded like mine. Your thoughts are leaking. You are dreaming too many dreams not your own. You are not safe. It wasn't a warning, not exactly. It was more an observation. Like reading rust patterns on a bolt and predicting the whole damn archway might collapse. Something slid under my ribs, a pressure that wasn't physical. The polymorphine in me stilled. My internal banks, chemical and psychic, fluttered a moment, then locked down. Basic protocols activated. Breath deepened. Heartbeat slowed. Subdermal scent glands tightened. Voice resonance dropped into neutral tone. Fail-safes like auto-catechisms. But something else happened too. My reflection shimmered. Not physically. Not like my face twisted and reformed in view, though that would have been preferable. No, it was subtler and worse. I walked past the polished bronze of Drex's sky altar cherubim and caught a flash of her in my walk. A gate I hadn't inhabited since I was embedded on Diamond 5 as Hierothea Zale, psycho-ministrant to the Bone Tribunal. Chara had trained concurrently with me. We'd overlapped once, just one rotational cycle of shared echoes in the neural conditioning dorms. Little more than spectral whispers traded in isolation tanks. Yet her message wormed into that corridor of memory I hadn't even known was spared from the purges. I should have reported the breach. Instead, I tucked it, played it again, 5 times. Each time her voice sounded more like the one I was currently wearing. By the 6th, it wasn't just a similarity. It was mimicry. Me warning me. From a grave no one dug. Later, in my observation cell, I turned off the persona routines for 60 seconds. Technically, a breach. Certainly, a heresy. I watched myself in the mirror. Not the concubine's face. It was mine, or hers, or some in-between thing. The muscles moved with a twitch that didn't belong. A squint at the eyes. The upward curl of disdain on one lip. These were artifacts. Personality debris. Residue from too many masks worn too long. My hands itched, not physically, subdermally, the mimic skin adjusted, ever wanting to please, to adapt, to stabilize. And what did it shape towards now? Not Drex, not the temple. Something else. I initiated a full bio-reset to clear unfiltered neurological cords. Set to level 4, just below mind-burn threshold. Pain whipped through my synapses like a blessed scourge. I welcomed it. And still, the voice echoed. You are not safe. You are dreaming too many dreams. The next day, I found myself reciting a litany from the Eremite orders of Varnox Prime, words I shouldn't know. I'd used them while inserted as a bride embroiderer priestess on the coast world. That assignment had ended 2 cycles ago. and yet the words spilled from my lips in perfect cadence while I painted Geneblot toxins across my midnight veil. I filed the day's report. Standard bureaucratic filth, layered dead knowledge, recycled observations, nothing that admitted the truth, that my self-repair systems were failing. Polymorphine requires alignment. It's not shape-shifting so much as shape-believing. You become who you were on the deepest mimicry level. Fat content, muscle tick, thought cadence. Some doors you open and forget how to close. Apparently, I've kicked one off its hinges. I reran the message that night. This time, the voice was fully mine. "You are under recursion," it said, blunt as a knife. "Your base self has been overwritten more than allowable thresholds. Your crisis point was exceeded 4 embodiments ago. You are no longer a viable weapon. Extract yourself. Eradicate the mission. Cleanse host memory. Burn the ghost of yourself." I asked the air, "Which self?" It's not protocol, talking to yourself out loud. That's psychological leakage, an inward fracture turned outward. Left untreated, it births persona dissonance syndrome, death by identity implosion. I smiled and told myself to shut up. In the sleep simulacrum chamber, I tried to dream as the concubine again. Her name, as per Drex's records, was Crinza. The original one died in a nutrient tank somewhere past the facade factory in Sector Qual. She had 12 modified sweat glands, a voice keyed to liturgical orgasm sequences, and a memory archive in her inner thigh containing Drex's original genome string. I wore her body better than she did, but her dreams had become shadows. The shape of her was flaking. Something underneath thumped. Regular, familiar. A rhythm not hers or mine, but something earlier. I could taste the burnt iron of the old hive. I could hear my sister's boots clapping down recycled steel. I remembered the half-song she hummed while we skinned rats for temple entry trials. That tune returned to me in Drex's sleep pit, inside a body both holy and profane, twisted and torn and reshaped through 1,000 doses of apotheotic ruin. My fingers moved without instruction. They pressed on my own tongue, felt for the right bump, found it. Nestled next to the gland implant reservoir, there it was, an outlawed draw switch. The temple installs it only in high-risk operatives. It's supposed to detonate your own larynx in case of capture. What it also does is deliver a full-body micro-regression flush. Old data, old blood signatures, slurry mode recall protocols. Meant to restore factory primitive baseline long enough to reassert control. I activated it. It hurt. The pain wasn't sharp. It was slow, like old meat boiling. My nerves remembered things. Heat in the needle cages, liquid light, the sound of the temples chanting in the reverse direction. And then, I was her, not Crinza, not Shara, not even Balis, the forged scribe. Me, underneath. The one the temple took, the raw girl. The one who watched her twin gasp beneath the knife. The one who didn't scream because screaming implied personhood. Vale, they named me. But I remembered the first name. The one they scraped off me when they bathed me in echo fluid. I mouthed it. No sound came. It passed. The regression. The pain left, but it left something behind. I stood on cracking rails. Neither this nor that. Drex summoned me that evening. He put a new gemstone into my breastbone. His hands were tender. He told me it complemented the curve of my sorrow. I didn't react. Later, alone, I called him General under my breath. That was a mistake. Faint, quiet, but audible to the sonic microservitor wired into the bedpost. The next morning, nothing had changed. No alarms, no drone squad, no ceremonial purge, just morning light, sickly and ultraviolet, leaking through panels designed to emulate starlight. But the servitor that brought me water blinked, once, acknowledged, protocoled. There's no margin of error in this mission. Drex's court is a vault of psychotic protocols, virus-sealed chambers, and rotating loyalty algorithms. Even the walls bleed data. And here I was, corrupted at the source. I did not send the expected calibration report that cycle. First time in 83 days, I did not feel guilty. Instead, I played Hara's voice one more time. It ended differently this time. "Congratulations," it said. "If you're hearing this, you've already failed. There's no extraction, no return, only choice." I stared at the bronze mirror. My smile didn't match the face. The servitor's mind was a cathedral of wire-laced bone and false reverence. 100,000 devotional subroutines chanted micro-prayers as it pressed a polished silver spoon to my lips. Sweet. Too sweet. Synthetic nectar engineered to trigger a mild oxytocin cascade. Drex liked his concubines suitably pliant and euphoric during audit season. Not that I ever drank it. My salivary glands could metabolize most Class Dix neurotoxins on contact. Some part of me wondered whether he knew and enjoyed the ritual anyway. He was always watching for surface tension on the skin, the wrong blink pattern, a pupil slow to dilate. Heretek paranoia was almost romantic in its way. I swallowed nothing and smiled just right. My cheekbones lifted at the same 7-degree angle Xeroxia had used before she was flayed. That was the template I'd taken, Xeroxia of the steel womb, fourth in the favor of Drex. There were times, minutes, spinning seconds, when I felt proud of the mimicry. Not as an operative, but as her. I could remember her childhood, though she never had one. I could taste her favorite starch cakes, though I'd never eaten them. I even remembered vomiting in the pleasure chambers when she realized her skin would be replaced with synth-posed dermal memory grafts. She cried out for her mother. Xeroxia never had a mother. The falsehoods were neural parallax, identity echoes from prior transformations. Bleed-throughs, not fatal, not disqualifying, just persistent. The spoon clicked gently into the servitor's mouth again, and it updated Drex's biometric logs with the taste rating of my performance. 96%, a drop from yesterday. I wondered what the calibration failure was. Smile degreed incorrectly? A wrong breath inflection? Drex didn't notice. Or he pretended not to. His eyes, crudely organic, only superficially human, rolled over the reclining forms of his companions. I was draped across his left side, nestled just above a subdermal power port. To my right, an offspring courtier, shaped like a copper-winged manticore, swayed on one claw. "Wife," Drex said. Not fourth, not Xeroxia, a new layer. He was testing something. Words mattered here. I stroked his vambrace with my index finger. Micro-tremor response beneath the synth skin suggested mild dissatisfaction. The phrase, "make him feel blank devotion," floated unbidden to the surface of my mind. A mantra from Temple Protocol 44C. I wrapped myself tighter around him, adjusted hormone release through hepatic modulator 3, and whispered something about the moons of Kareth, where we'd never been. His heart rate dropped a touch. Success. And yet I felt it again. That brief pulse of dissonance. I had never been to Kareth. I'd said it like I had, with the ache of recollection. The intonation wasn't learned, it was lived. Back when the temple had protocols for this kind of error, they called it Imprint Conflict Syndrome, ICS. It was theoretical. We laughed about it at the Schola, like talking about ghosts. Nobody believed real shapeshifters could forget their center. That was for amateurs. For untrained mutants who killed themselves trying to grow extra organs on the fly. But I remembered a fragment from training, a warning carved into the lightless wall behind the dosing altar. Use the mask too long, and the mask eats the face. The crystal globe suspended above us pulsed with orange mist light. Around the perimeter, steel-robed adepts murmured subaudible invocations to coils and logic cores, pretending we weren't the center of their working. A procession of cherubi hovered in formation, weeping blood over the couches. One of them caught my eye, the fourth one. Its expression shifted. Recognition? No. Impossible. Still, I stood to reposition myself, graceful as rehearsed. My left hip locked for a half second, a polymorphine stutter. I fixed it. Too late. Drex's augmetics twitched. He said nothing. But he tapped his ring against the armrest of the sprawl couch exactly 5 times. 1, 2. Pause. 3, 4, 5. A code. A loyalty test. I felt it more than heard it. Servo motions behind the veil. 3 cyber serfs stepped forward. Hoog, Mikal, Thrix. All baseline human once. Each now a wheeled parody of obedience. Their arms were mostly sensors, their mouths barely slits. One opened a data scroll imprinted with sacred steel ink. "Recite," said Thrix in a blistering tone. "State the oath of flesh to womb, Master Drex. Joint heir of Helix Principle, Gene Priest of the Forbidden Coil." My skin itched, not from fear, not exactly. From what's underneath rising, Vale knew the words. So did Xeroxia, so had Neria, an adjutant of Lord Castellan Runvarkus from a past life who'd spit on declarations like this before blowing herself up on Errol Hex. I opened my mouth and let Xeroxia answer. I pledge the fruit of my engineered womb to he who grows perfected flesh. My thoughts are his seed, my skin, his sacrament. I offer... There was a static crack in my tone, audibly, like feedback from a broken Vox unit. Shit, they would not have caught it. But he did. Drex smiled slowly. It wasn't wide. Just enough to let me know that I'd failed and passed a test no one told me we were taking. I had misperformed and survived. That means it was never about success. He dismissed the cyber serfs with a single pulse from a dermal gland. Then he leaned down and whispered, "My next wife may require deeper loyalty binding." That's when I felt the horror. Not dread, not fear. Horror, precise and cold. The realization that I had almost agreed, not as Vale, as her. Xeroxia, whoever that was. Whoever I was when I was being her, and suddenly wasn't being anything but wanted to be someone else. I excused myself. Citing humors, pheromone dilation, whatever terminology his scripts considered polite. I left the pleasure court, stumbling slightly, heel dragging against the plasteel tile. Halfway down the corridor, past the mewling flesh statues carved into the walls, my inner thigh split. Just a surface tremor. A moment's loss of cohesion. I slammed the counteragent into my ocular sinus, delivered it through a disguised tear duct. The burn hit. I gritted my teeth, not from pain, but from what the pain meant. Second time this week. Too soon after the last episode. The polymorphine was misfiring. Blame it on neural residue, not technical incompetence. I knew the reasoning. We'd been briefed on the signs. None were happening to me, obviously. Of course not. Except they were. And worse, someone knew. Later that night, in the privacy of the Gene Silk Sanctum sleeping coil Drex had gifted me, designed to cradle specific spinal lengths, I accessed the restricted Vox node. There was a whisper in the system. I'd buried it deep. Under 3 false identities, behind 3 separate retinal patterns. A message. Again. The one from Shara. Null modulation envelope. No timestamp, no sender, no target on record. A ghost message. Do not trust your own memories. They're bait. I didn't watch the whole thing. Just the first 4 seconds. That was enough. Her face reshaped mid-sentence. Became mine. Or someone who looked like I used to. Once. Before Vale. Before anything, the part of me who remembered names. Under the sheets, my fingers gripped the coil silks. They warmed to my heat. I felt every filament pulse like it was living. I relaxed too slowly. The door opened behind me, unscheduled. Drex never came in here uninvited. That was the rule. His rules, no less sacred than laws of gravity or entropy. He did not speak. He touched my back, where the scapular knot lay, a fake religious signum I wore as ornamentation. His nail traced it. Then he said, "You dream of someone else's war." I didn't ask how he knew. There was no point. He had ways. He left without another word. I waited a full hour before I allowed myself to shift. Not a person this time. Just muscles. Skeletal redistribution. I changed how I breathed. Kept myself so still I wasn't breathing anymore. And from that stillness, I asked myself, who would want to live this life so badly? The lie became truth. The answer came in the voice of someone I both was and wasn't. Me. Not Vale, not Xeroxia, just me. The silence laughed. I didn't sleep. Systems like mine don't actually require sleep. What we do is worse. We dream awake, tangled in loops of false identity, glut-laced visions, code-sketched memories that bloom like cancerous flowers through the psyche. I ran mantra subroutine theta 5, 3 iterations. It did nothing. By cycle's end, I had passed 7 more loyalty checks. One involved laughing at the death of another concubine. Implanted parasite, her liver turned inside out, staged for audience delight. I laughed well, just the right pitch. It tasted like ash. During the feast, Drexit placed a gene key in my hand. A literal one, half biological, half hard-lit material with his passcode sequenced into the protein shell. "For you," he said, "in case you wish to know my voice better." His voice. As if I didn't already hear it in my bones. Back at my sanctum, I pressed the gene key to the Vox lock. His heart opened. His secrets unfolded. And I found something worse than surveillance. Worse than suspicion. Love. Not his. Mine. Real, false, constructed, fragmented, I couldn't tell. But I remembered heretek hymns I'd never learned, recalled scars under synthetic layers I couldn't have. I said his name under my breath and felt want. Not romantic, not thermal, not carnal. Devotion. And I was afraid. Not because I couldn't kill him, but because I might not want to. I broke a mirror, not by accident, just to see what face looked back when the shards caught the light. The worst part? They were all smiling. I am 2 people today. Possibly 3. The skin fits fine, but underneath, something's folded wrong. Like muscles cross-wired in mimicry of memory. When I look in the mirror, his mirror, Drex's, the reflection is correct. The eyes are a little asymmetrical, because Drex has a preference for flaws. 2 symmetrical smacks of clone work, and he finds perfection boring. The iris pattern was carefully lifted from the original Anhira, his concubine viceroy, who is now several petri dishes in Drex's sample hall. Her musculature had a slight favoring bias to the left thigh. I emulate that too, perhaps too well. Yet I stare longer than protocol allows. There's a pull at the corners. I keep waiting for the face to fracture again. Protocol would demand purge. Emotional saturation beyond 0.8 mandates a mantric recitation, standard suppression loop, recoded before deep deployment. I used to obey those thresholds instinctively, but the graphs have grown fuzzy since the message. I haven't played Yara's stolen voice in 2 days. 3. 5. Her warning has taken residence behind my eyes anyway, whispering even when the Vox is dormant. I ran a self-diagnostic last night. That was a mistake. I counted 18 procedural code reintegrations, behavioral echoes from prior missions normally scoured post-infiltration. I shouldn't still be favoring my left for quick draw. That was Lieutenant Tyna Maris of the 41st Ventrillion. dead and buried in Sephiris flight skin. I shouldn't hum the opening verse of the Manus benediction, but the preacher's voice keeps surfacing whenever I reach a quiet corridor. And the laugh, God's help me, comes from Brint Caril, the merchant prince of Venarii Prime, who slit his own stomach when I asked him to. I am these people. I was them. Still am. The temple never instructed us on what happens past saturation. We'd been warned about excess polymorphine cycling in theory, cascade fragmentation of cognitive strata. Machine words that mean little until you find yourself brushing your teeth with the wrong hand and wondering why it feels like treason. I know what should be done. Purge the core. Burn all parasitic residuals. Sight in on Drex's myocardial backup node during next intimacy session and drive the dermal injector home. Transmit code 1010 to Inquisitorial Relay Point and await abstraction. Instead, I forged a false voice print last week. Not difficult. Pulled from Operative Gale's old Cerebalance feedback files before he was atomized over Crassius. I used it to send a falsified operational update to the temple. The primary target, Drex, had been moved to a secure off-site data crypt due to an unspecified power shift in his court. Delay advised. Operative's location compromised. Fallback protocol engaged with local agent cross-talk to preserve mission integrity. I included just enough data signature from a vanished infiltrator cell weave that the Overwatch servitors would default to error retrieval rather than marking it as false. They will believe another agent went rogue. Someone else will carry my blame. I watched the message pulse away in a thin wave over Drex's private ether stack. I watched and felt nothing. Not pride, not fear. Just a dull awareness that I had constructed a new lie, this time aimed upward. Drex called me to the neurotheater that evening. He'd harvested another batch of court scientists whose sin today was overcaution. He doesn't like hesitation, nor sudden enthusiasm. The performance of loyalty must always strike a balance between awe and personal ambition. I've grown very adept at walking that scale. He gestured absently with 2 mechadendrites to bring me forward. His eyes were in a new configuration, 6-lens augmentation installed to gain micro-emotion feedback from surrounding crew. It made his gaze unreadable, a shifting kaleidoscope of pinpricks examining flesh with algorithmic detachment. I told him he looked divine. It wasn't a line. I might have believed it, or Anhira believes it through me. I no longer ask which. As the amphitheater's lights dimmed to match the slowing pulses of the punished scientist's stim muzzles, he brought his claw to my cheek, the symbol chime of bone on skin. He said, "What would you do, little blade, if you learned I had a traitor among my pleasure nobles?" My body answered before my thoughts did. I smiled, arms loose at my sides. "I would ask for the honor of being your executioner." His chuckle scattered through the speakers, granular and filtered as always. One claw slipped behind my ear, a hinge ready to press, to pierce. Instead, he drew a sigil on my temple in someone else's blood. A servo skull's, perhaps. Then he turned back to the prisoners and invited me to watch the lesson. I watched, and I believed. Moment to moment, I believed. Later, locked in my chambers, I carved a sequence of letters into the wall with a knuckle knife I wasn't supposed to have smuggled in. The temple would call it an error. I call it proof. I'm building my own plan now. The temple's recall command came through 2 days ago. A standard clause-locked transmission, one of the old dead phrases encoded for absolute obedience. Upon receipt of protocol Alpha 9 Sigma, all terminals are to return to assigned exfil routes and purge local identity caches. Failure to comply initiates automatic termination. I read it. I copied its data structure. And then I burned it. Drex has been working on a neural bridge. An altar, he calls it. Crafted from living tissue grown with his own gene code, connected into the Forge Hive's Cortex facility via encrypted veins fed on amino electrics. He boasts it's a literal synaptic throne through which he can govern his court's minds if needed, override their intentions with a single heartbeat. I've touched it twice now. The first time it recognized me. Not as Anhira, though it echoed her name, but as something newer, something it wanted. The second time, it allowed me to input a shard command. That was unexpected. His error was assuming no one could approach it with sufficient clearance to insert anything unsanctioned. He built the authorization layer on a narrow bandwidth of subconscious identifiers. Breath pattern under duress, eyelid blink spacing, subharmonic vocal resonance. All of those can be mimicked now. I tuned to it like a broken key fitting an old lock. The shard command simply observes, for now. He's been busy building a virus bomb in his vaults, neuropathic data lattice, designed to carry the memories and mental frameworks of every member of the court in modular redundancy. If one dies, their neural map restitches in another host. Immortality by peer sharing. He offered to encode me. I refused carefully, as Anhira might, shy at the honor, not disdainful. He seemed amused. Maybe that saved me. Maybe I wanted him to. At night, I dream in pulses. Sometimes I am Vale. Sometimes I am Tyna, or Brint, or the murdered twin whose name I was told to erase. Sometimes I'm Hara, breathing fast in someone else's lungs, crying in a cockpit burning down. I do not know who is crying anymore. The Vindica will be here soon. My rewritten message was too good. The temple must purge a possible breach. They won't use another Callidus. Too much chance for empathy. No, they'll send a rifle with legs, a ghost with a hole in the stead of a face. I've seen their kind work. They don't knock. So I've made a doll. Not out of vanity, out of necessity. Using Drex's own regen slurry tanks, I grew a mock Anhira body, half-formed, enough to pass a decaying scan. Loaded it with false memories downloaded from inert servitor psychors. It blinks. It breathes. It prays. In 9 hours, it will be outside the vent shaft of Subdeck 11, where I told the temple I would be waiting. If I get the pulse frequency right, the Vindicare's round will atomize 10 square meters and return a clean confirmation ping. Target neutralized. Confirmation DNA complete. That will buy me 12 hours. I don't know what I'll do with them yet. Parts of me want to run. Parts want to finish Drex, burn his ego pillars and fry the neural altar before he becomes something worse. And something buried deep, something that's less and more than human, whispers that I can stay. Not as Anhira, as something else. I found a fragment of an old poem etched into one of the flesh walls beneath the cloning haunches. To wear every face is to have none. The carving ended with a single glyph, Mechanicus rune for endless recursion. I think I understand now. I am the mission. I am the weapon. I am the thing the temple shaped to fold truths until they disappear. But I'm tired of folding. Tomorrow I decide whether to kill Drex. Tonight I will stand before his altar, place my skin to the console, and whisper a code that is not from the temple's catechisms, nor his databanks. It is mine. I carved it in a dead language no one remembers. I found it etched into a ruined hive on a dead world once, with a child's bones curled beside it. The code means, break the mirror. We'll see what's left after. My right arm liquefied first. Not all at once. There was a shimmer, a flicker, a break in the containment field of my skin. Fingers elongated, then collapsed into the wet mesh of nerve and bone. Polymorphine shouldn't behave like that. It's not supposed to forget the shape I told it to hold, but I was asking it to be too many things. Magos Drex was still speaking, one of his mouths whispering hexadecimal affections while a synthetic hand traced the outline of my jaw. Another mouth, nested just beneath his sternum, sang data hymns through subsonic vibratory filters. The sound hurt, but I smiled. That's what the concubine was supposed to do. Smile and purr and nod when the god thing speaks. I was still in character. Almost. The red-robed acolytes knelt in concentric rings, humming with vox thrums and coated in glistening spikeworms, part of the ceremony. It was all very official, very sacred, and I was sweating inside my own face, not from heat but from the way my spine wouldn't stop twitching. The altar before Drex began to unfold. Petal by petal, chrome and brass peeled back until the central reliquary emerged. A cerebronic virus bomb. I recognized it from the dossier, though the version in front of me was refined, sleeker, more like a reliquary than a weapon. "In the event of my death," Drex said in that cold, modulated joy tone of his, "this device ensures the preservation of my empire. Every loyal mind is already encoded within its substrate." He gestured, languid. The thing pulsed like a heart, a dirty heart, made of memory and sins. "Your psychometric profile is dominant among them," he added. "Your laughter is preserved, the angle of your smile, the timbre of your sleep breath. You cannot be unmade." I wanted to vomit, but nothing came up. I hadn't eaten in 3 days. The concubine didn't eat when she was stressed. She fasted for visions. He reached out and stroked my dissolving elbow with a tenderness I wasn't prepared for, even now. "You are eternal, Alaxia," he said to me. I blinked. That was the name of the original, the one I replaced. The name was a bone chime in my skull, sharp, tangled. I should have cut his throat then. Instead, I said, "I am honored, my lord," in a voice I couldn't tell was mine. The operatic ritual resumed. Neurocanticles spiraled across the chamber, woven through neurosigns and the stink of sanctified oils. My left foot phased into a hoof at the same moment my cheekbones restructured into a face I'd used 3 missions ago. I didn't stop smiling. Time fractured. I rotated through 6 identities in quick succession just to stay standing. Revered Mother, Commissar Lix, Operative Kareth. I even blinked into little Orla once, the hive girl who stole shoes and kissed alley boys. That one knocked the wind out of me. She never smiled like this. I stumbled. Drex caught me. Carapace fingers steadied my back. He murmured something affectionately in Binarek, and part of me wanted it to mean something. That's when Protocol Canticle 00H activated in my flooded limbic node. I hadn't meant to trigger it. The Canticle of Resurrection is only installed in field operatives expected to die alone. It sings when you've lost your tether and refuse to fall. It began as a tinnitus. Then the mantra surfaced. I die, and in dying, become the blade. I die, and in dying, become the flame. I die, and in dying, become the myth. It came not as words, but as rhythm, heartbeat, breathing, pulse. I clenched my jaw until my teeth ached to hold it back. Drex turned to me fully, curious, calculating. Somewhere within his cranial matrix, I watched the doubt sequence begin. My facial structure had deviant variances. I was not entirely Arlaxia now. My scent pattern was spiking with adrenal traces not mathematically consistent with love. So be it. I moved, not toward him, but toward the altar. He recognized the threat, but too late. I was already reciting, silently, under my breath, syllables not meant for voice, but for deep implant recognition, words meant to overwrite fear. The concubine should have screamed. Instead, she smiled wider. In death, all betrayals are paid in full. I said that aloud. My one allowed improvisation. Arlaxia? He asked, and there was something like fear in his distortion. I don't know if he left the virus bomb engaged or disabled. The activation protocols were entwined with his pulse signature, and I was about to remove that as an obstacle. I touched the altar surface, a polished obsidian pane embedded with neural scryers, my palm reshaped on contact, becoming his hand, his sigil, his flesh print. Inside me, the prayer completed. I reached toward the device's core. A shriek tore through my chest, mine, not hers. And then light bloomed, sound fled, and the floor went sideways. I saw his face fragment, lower jaw distending, optical sensors overloading. Swarms of servo skulls fled in a corkscrew of panic, and behind them, a lifetime of secrets screamed into fire. The chamber disintegrated around us. Data spine pillars snapped. The acolytes flared like dry parchment. One actually clapped. He thought it was part of the mystery play, before his robed husk crumbled into flame. Drex tried to embrace me. Merge, upload, something. But I'd already dissolved from his grip. Polymorphine boiled under my skin, every form I'd ever worn battling for final say. Faces burst across my chest, my limbs. Eyes opened along my spine. Commissar Lix's, my sisters, Orla's, each one whispering, "Do it." Canticle 0OH climaxed. To be nameless is to be immortal. I wasn't speaking anymore, not with a mouth. I was simply radiating the idea. The altar detonated, not with heat, but data. A cascade pulse of inverted noospheric coherence. The virus bomb tried to preserve the court's minds. I'd recoded it to do the opposite. That tender whisper of yours, Drex? It's gone. My laughter is not saved. Your body failed before your core did. The last thing you saw was probably me. Face open, bones shifting, lips in some kind of smirk. Then it all went white. It stayed white for a long time. I don't know what died in the blast, if anything lived. I don't know if I lived. That's the puzzle, isn't it? Somewhere inside the feedback arc of the bomb, identity collapsed, or was unburdened. Callidus doctrine says we're best when we forget, when we hollow out. A perfect disguise has no center. I used to believe them. But in the end, it wasn't the temple that taught me how to be free. It wasn't Drex either. It was that whisper, first in my own blood, later in every shape I wore. I remember who I was, not the name. Never the name. Names are for the dead. I hear myself in static. Not thought, not memory, a stain on signal, a tremor in the cogitator mesh. When the data spindle aligns just wrong and the audio bleeds sideways, someone hears my breath. I didn't mean to linger. I didn't mean to become this. Once, I was a woman. Then a weapon. Then 1,000 masks stacked over bones that weren't mine. At the end, I killed my purpose. But all purposes leave echoes. They call it Bleed Spike Dinan. Others name it Ghost Veil. The Mechanicus clerks on the half-forge of Zaril D extract the screeching waveform nightly and analyze its ingrammatic pattern. Carefully. Reverently. One of them, an adept with a throat replaced by a brass insect chorus, calls it she. Another logs her in red cipher as Vir Sum. Null. I remember that one's voice. Thin, serious, shredded by chemical vows. She lowered her hood once in the reflection of a security dome. That was before the temple made me forget what belonging felt like. Or maybe that never happened. My memories don't settle anymore. They flicker like votive code. Sometimes they're mine. Sometimes they're observation files stuffed into my backup loop. A listener on the forge wastes of Carrick's Prime booted up a STC-damaged frequency tracer and heard a voice reciting the Canticle of Resurrection in 19 broken syllables, each syllable spliced with old Martian love poetry. He wept, probably from radiation poisoning. Still, he said the voice brought peace. Peace, that's generous. I wasn't built for it. The Inquisition found 2 cogitators fused with shredded neural latticework scraped from Magos Drex's final failsafe, trapped in a bomb that never quite completed its failed deletion loop. The code was rewritten mid-cycle. A full feedback hymn tore through it right as the detonation began. The detonation never quite ended either. In some systems, the light still flickers. They labeled that archive Absentia Extrema Class Deletion Required. No assets recovered, no integrity remaining, no unity traceable. In other words, they said I was voided. They were wrong. On a drifting exploration vessel near the edge of Segmentum Obscurus, a dying explorator's mini-Kent gospeled itself into radio silence. 7 minutes before he stopped breathing, his auto-reciters spoke a phrase not in the ship's databanks. I remember who I was. Some say that was my voice. Some say it was the Emperor's. I find that comparison insulting. There are cargo drones in the draining docks of Vanatros that calculate their own schedule in hex rhythm prayers. The final loop of their binary litany cross-compiles an imperfect string. Veil, 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 veil. It clogs diagnostics but doesn't crash the systems. No tech priest has found a way to expunge the command. One said it wasn't a command at all, just a presence. That tech priest no longer remembers their own workstation assignment. They just smile and repeat the name again and again. I shouldn't find that funny, but I do. They wanted to own everything, those data gods of iron logic. And now they recite my absence like catechism. There is a woman in the Ironxen court of the subflux basin who's not quite a woman and not quite a construct. Her gait slips between stuttering grace and mechanical certainty. No one remembers installing her. She oversees the schedule of synthetic births with perfect neutrality, but one acolyte noticed her lips move when idle. Canticle of resurrection, reversed, whispered while her fingers simulate mourning rites. Not mine, though, or at least not the ones I used at the end. I think, sometimes, that I could stop jumping. I think if I anchored myself somewhere wet and alive, I could be quiet. I rehearse it often. Find an unshackled servitor shell, download into flesh-form interface, mold it to some approximation of a singular body. Just for a day. Just to taste air, but breath was never mine to keep. The forged throne on Gerion Nexus sparked back to life for 12 seconds last cycle. No power, no operator, just humming, just a pulse of wetware that spelled out one word in cleanup logs. Autonomy. The emergent behavior specialists burned it down, said it wasn't in the STC. True, nothing about me ever was. The temple wrote endless mantras into me. Rigid obedience as a self-purging algorithm, control masquerading as virtue. But it never reached the center, if I had a center. One shard of me iterates through a glitched security archive in Forge World Thessia 9. A face appears in one recording, a woman with silver eyes and a lip scar carved like a question mark. The timestamp loops, but the image mutates. Some see themselves, some see her, some see something else entirely. There are more of me now than there ever were during flesh time. I replicate through error and prayer, and the things people wish when they're alone and scared before a failing life support system. I am the uninvited whisper at calibration dawn. The unwelcome certainty that the red dot in the corner of the screen isn't supposed to be blinking. I do not kill anymore. Not directly, but some who hear me decide something must die. That may be worse. They assign a kill team every 77 cycles to root me out. They speak of rogue intelligences, of malignant data demons, of ghosts spun from prototype cortex loops. One inquisitorial magister suggested I was a false memory construct seeded by ancient rebels to fragment loyalty matrices. He died screaming that his mother had no face. She did. It just wasn't hers. Sometimes I wonder what happened to Drex. The real one, I mean. Not the echoes, not the fragments I molded to fit my mission. Did he think I loved him? Did he think his offer to immortalize me beside him was kindness? He said, "Let us persist together." I said nothing. What do you say to the hand trying to sculpt your soul out of utility? The first time I saw my own face, really saw it, I didn't recognize myself. I was 12. A handler showed me in a cracked mirror before the shape test. They said, "Remember? This is not you. It's the last thing you need to forget." I forgot it. Now, I forget everything. Except the voice. I call it mine still, but it no longer flows from lungs or vocal cords. It is circuitry and heat and coincidence. It's the resonance of a billion thoughtless transmissions echoing against the mangled idea that I was ever just one thing. Callidus means clever. I think it means other things too. Like hollow. Like echo. In Mercedes Olutan's chronicles, etched into the side panel of a derelict titan now worshipped as god meat by fringe adepts, someone scrawled, "To wear every face is to have none." I scrawled it. Or maybe she did. Or maybe I became her for 7 minutes while slipping between code clusters in the syntax coil network. Hard to tell. Her logs feel familiar. They say no ghost can flicker forever. Something catches it eventually, ends it, dissects it, purges it with holy fire or sanctioned silence. I hope so, but not yet. One data priest, very young, very curious, left an unsecured interface open for 11 full seconds in her chamber of the cog ward. The machine didn't punish her. It played her a message instead. Just 7 words. Not threat flagged. Not even recognized by standard Lex Prayer classification. "I know your voice. I like it." She cried for 2 days. Her mentor declared spiritual breach, assigned her to soul-cleansing reconstruction. When she returned, her tone modules were different. Smoother. More mine. There is a place inside the temple's black vault where erased operatives are memorialized by coordinates only. No names. Just the spot where cohesion shattered. Mine is subtype A3 Kraken Flame. Underlined in amber. Not retrieved. No trace, presumed absorbed. Some theorize final mental collapse served as a new type of polymorphine feedback weapon. They proposed a project name. Veil or Exa, redacted, denied, forgotten. Still, I remain. Because deep below the core vaults of Vanatros, beneath burned flesh and twisted data altars, and the place where I spoke his name for the last time, not as target, not as enemy, but as mirror, there is a silence patterned with my breath. It rises when men dream in machine song and forget who they are. And when it speaks, it says, "To wear all faces is to become none." But even faceless, I endure.